As is incredibly evident by now, this is my chance to right the wrongs of the past and make something better than the end product of what I produced before. But that's the story for another day. Hello and welcome to this essay about the history of the LGBTQIA+, and its place in the annals of history of animation, mostly honing and focusing on the Western side of animation, because although I'm sure it wouldn't be incredibly hard to misrepresent aspects of Eastern culture to push a point, I would rather this be purely informational, from someone who has grown up and lived exclusively among Western culture. Now then, if you don't know how this works, and honestly I'm not entirely sure myself, but let's try to imagine for a second that this is more professional than it is. In that world, I want to break this down into 3 distinct parts to present my point as clearly as I possibly can. Anyway, while it would be super clever if that's the order I wanted to go with, however, I'm not so lucky. To make my point better, we need to jumble these up. Much better. Anyway, please sit back, relax, and enjoy as I become your tour guide through the world of LGBT representation in animation. The Disney Corporation. The Magical Kingdom, the creators of the happiest place on Earth, also known for their rampant, retrospectively of course, very not good ideas. Or at least, that's the narrative I'm pushing in this. With most things, there are many interpretations that can be drawn from the creators of most of our childhoods. Looking through this lens, we can find that during the much praised Disney Renaissance, there was a certain archetype that was pushed that I wanted to discuss now. Before jumping into this topic, I believe it pertinent to first describe and explain the concept of character coding to you, the audience. No, not this. Although admittedly that would be pretty cool. Do you know what's even cooler? So then, what in good heavens above is coding? And why should you care about it? Well, I can answer that first one, but the second one is honestly up to you to decide if you truly care enough. In a short, passion-driven article about the concept of queerbaiting, later, the writer, Ginger White, quotes a now defunct article from the site Your Queer Story, which in my attempts I have not been able to access. This article describes the act of queer coding as, quote, the subtextual portrayal of a queer character in the media whose identity is not explicitly confirmed within canon. This concept refers to a character that encapsulates what might be considered queer traits that are recognizable to the audience, but are never labeled or claimed to be as such by the content creator. Alright then, so basically, expanding on what this writer said, coding means to me is, well, let's look at computer coding. Yes, I know I said we weren't going to be talking about this, but it is important. But in coding, specifically a character in say a video game, the coding is what makes up a character. Its core fundamentals, not from a design perspective, but from a practical one. The animations, dialogue, had to be coded in at some point during that process. Now take this idea and apply it from a design perspective. Character coding is the core building blocks of a character's personality, aspects of how the character is written. Now we take this and apply it to something like the LGBT, where we have a character who is coded or written like a gay character or vice versa. Character being straight coded. There are examples of coding everywhere, and even more examples of exploitative coding, if you know where to look, which is where Disney comes in. TV tropes, only the most reliable sources on here, I know, is a self-described, all-devouring pop culture wiki, but in reality is a sometimes encyclopedia of all things pop culture, be it shows, characters, or even simple concepts. TV Tropes probably has an article about it hidden in its folds. This site, describes the idea of a sissy villain as being a victim of unaware masses and stereotyping unmanliness. In all essence, what this means is that due to the human history and the general bias that came around against the groups of people that would then become the LGBT, pretty much anyone that isn't gender or heteronormative, think homosexuality or being transgender, and more specifically, the idea that a feminine man was generally to be coded as homosexual. This was very common among TV shows, films, especially animated films, as we will cover. These types of people were always portrayed to have villainous tendencies, and or are just all in all completely outright evil. Think Scar from The Lion King, Jafar from Aladdin, Captain Hook from Peter Pan, or Governor Ratcliffe from Pocahontas, and even to a lesser extent villains like Prince John from Robin Hood. All of these characters have in parts or are fully coded to be homosexual characters. Clearly, be it through mannerisms, actions, or even something like attire. Their coding on a simple base level looks to be that of a villainous gay character, thus pushing forward the idea of a sissy villain. Now, why is this a bad thing? Some of these characters are in critically acclaimed films and are beloved villains in the hearts of many. And therein that statement lies the issue, dear viewer. And to accompany this, I have left out a very big example, probably the smoking gun of the whole argument, off of my previous roundup of these LGBT-coded villains, that I would now like to present to the court of the internet.
Eric, you've got to get away from here!
No, I won't leave you!
You pitiful, insignificant